Chapter 5, The Whispering Darkness. Inside the vault, the book's hunger. Elowyn's fingers trembled over the ancient tome, her pulse a wild drumbeat in her ears. The ink on the pages twisted, shifting and coiling into dark tendrils of script. They rose from the parchment, slithering like living things, wrapping around her wrists and pulling her closer, her vision blurred. The world around her faded. Then, suddenly, she was elsewhere. The chamber, the ruins, Celine, all gone. Instead, she stood within a great abyss, a vast nothingness swirling with shifting, violet-black mist. The only figure draped in shadow, tall, draped, tall, elegant, terrible. The god's form was indistinct, constantly shifting between divine beauty and monstrous horror. And then it smiled, a voice, sweet as honey, brushed against her mind. My child. My blood. Elowyn took a step back, her breath shallow. No! I am the truth, little one. The being extended a hand, its long fingers gleaming with dark fire. Do not fear me. You are mine. You always have been. The abyss pulsed with a sickly warmth, like a heartbeat beneath her feet. She could feel it now, the power in her veins, the undeniable pull to something greater than herself, a power vast enough to tear fate apart. The god's voice turned soft, almost affectionate. You suffer because you are incomplete. You are weak because you deny yourself. It stepped closer, its very presence making her skin burn and freeze at once. But I can mend you. I can make you whole. A gentle hand touched her cheek. Accept me, child. Take my hand and I will give you everything. Elowyn's heart pounded. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her wanted to say yes.
Outside, the battle rages. Alistair, Lyra
and Garen fought like demons against the endless tide of undead. Garen's greatsword shone with holy fire, cutting through the abominations like paper. Lyra's hands burned with arcane light, unleashing waves of flame and ice. Alistair, despite his wounds, refused to fall, his sword carving a path forward. But the creatures kept coming. We can't hold them forever, Lyra shouted. Garen gritted his teeth. Then we move. The princess is still inside. A sudden surge of dark energy pulsed from the keep. Alistair's eyes widened. Something's happening in there. Garen didn't hesitate. We have to get to her! Now! With one last sweeping strike, he cleared a path, and the three of them rushed inside.
Inside the vault! Celine struggle!
Celine gasped as inky black tendrils wrapped around her throat, tightening like a noose. She struggled, clawing at them, but they were unrelenting, pulling her away from Elowyn. The princess stood frozen, eyes glazed, trapped in a trance as the book devoured her mind. Celine gritted her teeth, fury flaring in her chest. Elowyn, wake up! But the princess didn't move. Celine snarled. She had sworn never to fail her again. With a growl of effort, she drew a hidden dagger from her belt and plunged it into one of the tendrils. Black ichor splattered, and the tendrils writhed in agony, loosening just enough for her to break free. She hit the ground hard, coughing, but she didn't stop. She dragged herself forward, ignoring the burning in her lungs. Elowyn, she shouted, reaching out despite the shadows gripping her limbs. She was not losing her.
Not now!
Not ever! Just as the darkness began to consume them both, a burst of light erupted from the entrance. Alistair, Garen and Lyra burst into the room. Garen raised his sword high, and a wave of divine radiance surged forth, scattering the darkness like smoke in the wind. Celine gasped as the tendrils burned away, freeing her completely. Alistair rushed forward, sword drawn. Elowyn, snap out of it! But the princess remained trapped, her mind still lost in the abyss, and in the distance the god only smiled. Chapter 6. A Pact with Shadows. The abyss, now a vast sea of swirling shadows, enveloped Elowyn in a suffocating embrace. It hummed with a dark resonance, vibrating in her very bones, as though the fabric of reality itself was being rewoven. The figure before her, the god, loomed larger now, its true form slowly revealing itself. Its shape, shifting like a living nightmare, finally settled into something both majestic and terrifying. Glowing eyes, the colour of deep, ancient stars, locked with hers. The princess felt the pull again, stronger, more insistent than before. She could feel the weight of her blood, the curse that ran deep in her veins, stretching through generations like a binding chain. The god's voice sang through her thoughts, a soft and seductive melody that slipped past her defences. You fear what you are, little one. You tremble before your destiny, but it has always been written. There is no escape. Elowen's heart thudded in her chest, but the more the god spoke, the less it seemed like a threat and more like an invitation. It spoke to her innermost fears and desires. You were never meant to be weak, Elowen. You have been shackled by the petty restraints of mortal life. Imagine what you could do with true power. Imagine what you could save with my strength. Her breath caught in her throat, her hand unconsciously reaching for the shadows that seemed to grow closer, willing her to embrace them. I can offer you the world, child. A new fate, one where you are not a victim of destiny, but its master. Think of it. The power to heal the kingdom, to end the suffering of your people, to make them bow to you. Elowen trembled. The weight of the choice was suffocating, a pull so strong that her vision began to blur. She could feel the whisper of her ancestors in her blood, each one beckoning her forward into the unknown. This power, this destiny, was a part of her, whether she embraced it or fought against it. I have the blood of your kind, Elowen whispered, barely daring to breathe the words. The god's eyes gleamed with hunger, his voice warm with approval. Yes, your lineage runs through you like a river of flames, and I too am a part of that fire. You were meant to be a vessel for greatness, a vessel for me. But as the god's voice grew louder in her mind, a cold realization settled over Elowen. There was no escaping this. She wasn't just a descendant of the fallen god. She was his legacy, bound to him by blood and fate. She would either accept it or be consumed by it. The god continued, weaving his words like a silken thread around her heart. I offer you freedom from your doubts, from your weakness. I will give you the power to reshape the world, to undo the chains of fate. Elowen stood on the precipice. She could see the terrible bureau that awaited her, a future of strength, of dominion, of salvation. But then another thought flashed through her mind. Selene, the girl who had saved her, fought for her, loved her as more than just a princess. Her friends standing beside her. Alastair, Lyra, Sagaran, each of them willing to risk their lives to protect her, to stand by her against the darkness. Their faces flashed in her mind, faces full of fear, but also of hope, the warmth of friendship, the love of those who fought for her even when she felt lost. The god was not her only choice. I know what I can give you, the god purred, reaching toward her with his tendrils of shadow. But what can they offer? They are mere mortals, weak, fearful. They will betray you when they realize what you truly are. Not all of them, Elowen whispered, her voice shaking, but growing stronger with each word. She fought to resist the darkness, to steady herself. Not all of them will betray me. The god's smile faltered just for a moment. He had never expected this. You will not be so foolish, child. They will see you for what you are, the heir to a bloodline of monsters, a bringer of destruction. But Elowen held firm, the force of her will pushing back against the god's insidious touch. She had felt the darkness, but she had also felt love. She had seen true strength in her allies. The god's voice turned more insistent, more desperate. You are mine. Accept me. Accept your true nature, and you will have more than you ever dreamed. Elowen shut her eyes. She had to make the decision, here and now. She could embrace the god's dark power, accept the future it promised, a world ruled by shadows, or she could fight for something else. For her kingdom, for her people, for her friends. I reject you, she whispered, her voice steady. I will not be your vessel. The god's laughter echoed around her, bitter and dark. Fool, you cannot run from your blood, Elowen. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, and the abyss began to collapse. The god's form twisted, shifting into something far darker and far more terrible. You are mine, princess, but this will not be the end. And with one final violent surge of energy, the god faded, leaving Elowen gasping for breath in the emptiness. Back in the vault, the battle for her soul. In the dimly lit chamber, the book snapped shut with a resounding crack. Elowen gasped as if waking from a long nightmare. The tendrils that had been choking her soul faded, but the remnants of their dark power lingered, a heavy weight in her chest. Celine, who had been struggling to rise from the ground, rushed to her side, her hands shaking but determined. "Elowen, are you?" Elowen looked up, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "It tried to take me, to change me, but I wouldn't let it." Her voice faltered for a moment. "I almost gave in, but I remember why I can't." Before Celine could say anything, the others arrived, Alistair, Lyra and Sir Garin. Alistair immediately knelt beside, his eyes wide with concern. "Are you all right?" Elowen looked at them, a smile breaking through the haze of doubt and fear. "I'm not all right, but I will be. We have work to do." Her voice held firm resolve now. The god's power still sang in her blood, but she would not fall to it. She was more than just the darkness in her veins, and she would fight for the future she could still shape. Together. Chapter 7. A Bitter Legacy. The air in the ancient keep was heavy with the echoes of their recent battle. The remnants of the undead lingered in the distance, but for now the darkness had receded. Still, Elowen could feel the weight of the god's presence lingering in her veins like a shadow following her every step. She sat near the flickering hearth, her back against the stone wall, trying to steady her breath. The others had gathered around her, waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to reveal the truth that had been locked within the ancient book. The princess hesitated, glancing at Celine, who was still trying to wipe the blood from her arms, and then at Alistair and Lyra, both of whom were unusually quiet, eyes fixed on her. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter than usual, as though the weight of her words might crush her. The book is more than just a record of knowledge. It's a curse, a key to something far darker." Celine's brows furrowed as she sat beside her, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What do you mean? What's inside it?" Elowen took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "The book contains the story of my family, of our bloodline. It tells the history of the kingdom, but it also reveals the truth about our origins." Alistair leaned forward, his expression one of intense curiosity. "What truth? What does it say?" Elowen's throat tightened. She had known it was coming. She had known that this revelation would not only change her, but it would change the way everyone saw her and her family. My family, we are descendants of an evil god," she whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. The words felt like ash in her mouth. "My ancestors made a pact with that god long ago, one that cursed our bloodline." The others stared at her in shock, the gravity of her words sinking in. Celine's eyes widened in disbelief, and Alistair's jaw clenched, but his expression was not one of fear. It was something else entirely. "You mean all the royals in your family?" Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," Elowen replied. "Every king and queen in my line, all the way back to the first monarchs, are cursed with the blood of this god, this evil that runs through our veins. It's why the magic in our family is so strong, why we have the power to rule, but it's also why the kingdom has always teetered on the edge of ruin." Silence fell over the group, each of them processing the revelation. Elowen could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their judgment and the fear that would inevitably come. But before she could speak again, Alistair broke the silence.
"If that is true, then we've been handed a weapon,"
he said, his voice filled with something sharp and calculating. "The power of an evil god. Your bloodline is the key to unlocking that power. Why not use it? Why not take what's been thrust upon you and control it?" The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Elowen blinked at him, her mind struggling to catch up with the sudden shift in direction. "What are you saying?" she asked, unsure whether she should be worried or relieved. Alistair's eyes gleamed with an almost unsettling fire. "I'm saying that we can use this curse, this power. The god's influence can work for us, for the kingdom. If we can harness it, we can turn the tide in our favour. We can use it to strengthen our kingdom, our people. This could be the greatest weapon in our arsenal." Elowen shook her head, heart pounding in her chest. "Alistair, you can't seriously be suggesting..." But Alistair raised his hand to stop her, his tone firm. We can't be afraid of what's in your blood, Princess. If you embrace it, we could wield it. If you let this power consume you, it will destroy us all. But if we control it, if we use it against our enemies, then it will be the key to our future. We won't be victims of this curse. We'll be its masters. For a moment, Elowen was speechless. His words burned in her chest like they were branding her very soul. The temptation was there, the dangerous allure of what he was suggesting. She could feel it, this dark power that ran through her veins, calling to her, urging her to listen, to consider. But in her heart, she knew the truth. This was not a power to be used lightly. It was a weapon forged in blood and darkness, and once it was wielded, there would be no going back. I don't know if I can do that, she whispered, voice breaking as the weight of the decision pressed down on her. I can't risk losing myself. I can't risk becoming the thing I'm trying to fight against. Alistair's expression softened, though there was still an edge of determination in his eyes. I understand your fear, Elowen, but you don't have to do it alone. We'll help you. We'll find a way to control this power, to keep it from corrupting you. But you have to understand, this could change everything. Selene, who had been unusually silent up until this point, spoke up, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Alistair, I can see the logic in your words, but what you're suggesting is dangerous. This power, it's not something we can simply control. The princess nodded, turning her gaze to Selene. She was relieved to see her steady resolve, a familiar face of strength. Alistair looked between them, frustration flickering across his face. You don't understand. This is our chance to secure the future of the kingdom. If we don't act now, we'll be lost. But Lyra stepped forward then, her calm voice cutting through the tension. Alistair, we've all seen what this power can do. We've seen what it tried to do to Elowen. Power like that doesn't simply serve us, it controls us. We need to be careful. A heavy silence filled the room as the group took in the weight of her words. Elowen took a deep breath and stood slowly, her decision crystallizing in her mind. We need to find another way. There has to be another path. I can't allow myself to become that, no matter how much I want to save my people, no matter how much I want to protect them. Alistair's gaze hardened, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he nodded slowly, his tone quieter now, but still resolute. Then we'll find another way. But we'll need all the help we can get, and time is running out. Elowen looked at the group around her. The weight of her bloodline, the legacy of the god that tainted her, pressed upon her like a cold, suffocating blanket, but her heart was firm. She would not fall to the shadows. She would not allow her family's curse to define her. Then we begin now. We'll find a way to fight this, to take back control of our destiny together. And in that moment, Elowen knew that the path ahead would be difficult. There would be battles ahead, not just against the forces of darkness, but against the very power inside her. But she would face them, not alone, but with those who still believed in her, and with a fierce determination to shape her own fate. The god's power may have been in her blood, but her will would remain her own.